You ever hear a story that makes you question everything you thought you knew about justice? This isn't your typical courtroom drama. Nope. This one's got everything. A promising student who seemed destined for greatness. A shocking conviction that left even the most hardened attorneys speechless. And a twist so unexpected, you'd swear it came straight from a Netflix crime thriller. Imagine waking up thinking today's just another Tuesday, only to end the day with your entire future ripped away. 25 years behind bars. Just like that, the judge, unyielding, the prosecutor, ice cold, giving a victory speech like he'd just won a trophy. The student's family in shambles, tears flowing, heartbroken. But here's where it gets wild. What happened next turned the entire courtroom into a real-life movie scene. This isn't just a story about one case. It's about how fragile truth can be, how one forgotten piece of evidence, one last-minute motion, or even a single person's voice can flip destiny on its head. And trust me, the part where the real culprit gets arrested right there in front of everyone, yeah, that's the moment that left the courtroom stunned, jaws on the floor. If you think you know how this ends, you don't. Keep watching, because the twists come faster than you'd believe. And every second counts. It's almost surreal when life flips on you like that, isn't it? There stood a promising student, the kind every parent brags about at family gatherings. Straight A's, volunteer work, debate club, check, check, check. Teachers called him a future leader. Classmates looked up to him. But now that same student stood shackled, facing a shocking conviction that would make headlines for weeks. You could practically feel the oxygen leaving the room as the judge read the sentence. 25 years. That number hit like a punch to the gut, making the courtroom hold its breath. People who had come in thinking this would be just another trial suddenly sat up straighter, eyes wide. Even seasoned reporters lowered their cameras for a second, as if trying to process the emotional whiplash. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not to him. It wasn't just strangers reacting this way. Friends and teachers packed into the gallery sat frozen, whispering to each other in disbelief. This can't be real. Someone muttered under their breath, blinking back tears. The shocking conviction seemed to echo off the wood-paneled walls like a cruel joke gone too far. In that moment, you could tell, this case wasn't just another name on the docket. This was a story that would ripple through the entire community. And here's the thing about moments like this. They never just end here. As stunned faces turned toward the defense table, one couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would anyone speak up? Would this promising student accept his fate? Or would the next chapter turn the whole room upside down? The moment the judge's gavel hit the desk, it was like someone flipped a switch inside the room. Tears flowed instantly from the first row. His mother, barely able to breathe between sobs, clutched at her chest like she was physically hurting. Friends huddled together, shaking and crying, while even a few strangers wiped their eyes. The judge's harsh sentence hung in the air like smoke after a fire, thick and suffocating. It's wild how silence can scream louder than words, isn't it? Through all this heartbreak, the student just sat there, staring at the floor. Not a single word, not a single tear. His lawyer leaned in, whispered something, but he didn't flinch. This wasn't defiance. It felt more like shock, the kind that freezes you from the inside out. People in the gallery whispered to each other, asking, "Why isn't he saying anything?" Some thought it was strength. Others thought it was numbness. The judge's harsh sentence had clearly rattled everyone. But the student remained a statue. If you've ever had that sinking feeling in your gut, the one where your mind drifts into a dark tunnel and nothing feels real, you'd recognize that same blank stare on his face. Meanwhile, the judge quickly shuffled papers, pretending to focus on legal formalities. But the slight tremor in his hand said otherwise. This wasn't just another open and shut case for him either. And as the courtroom settled into uneasy quiet, it became clear, this story wasn't finished. The next voice to break the silence would be one nobody expected. With the sentence handed down, the prosecutor stood up, straightening his tie like he was accepting an award. His voice was sharp, calculated, like reading from a script he'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Justice has been served," he declared, his tone colder than an ice storm in January. You could almost hear the prosecutor's cold speech bouncing off the courtroom walls like stray bullets. But here's where it got interesting. As his words echoed, eyes naturally drifted toward the jury box. That's when people started noticing the shift. One juror stared hard at the floor. Another rubbed her hands nervously. A third blinked rapidly. biting his lip like he was holding something back. The jurors were clearly uncomfortable, their body language screaming louder than the prosecutor ever could. It's strange how collective doubt works, isn't it? You could almost see the weight of second thoughts pressing down on them like invisible bricks. These were regular people, teachers, office workers, retirees, now caught in a moral hangover they hadn't expected. Their shifting in seats, the avoidance of eye contact with the defense table, it all spoke volumes. This cold victory speech wasn't landing the way the prosecutor imagined, and as the speech dragged on, the air inside the courtroom grew heavier, thicker. Some jurors exchanged quick glances, others shifted uncomfortably. Tapping their pens against their notepads, the prosecutor didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he didn't care. But one thing was certain, the emotional cracks were starting to show, and what happened next would crack them wide open. Just when everyone thought the drama had peaked, something totally unexpected happened. From the middle rows where the victim's family sat all trial long, came a sudden trembling voice. A woman, eyes swollen from days of crying, stood up, her voice cracking but clear enough for all to hear. This was the victim's family outcry, but not the angry, vengeful kind people braced for. "I never wanted this, I'm not like this," she cried out, hands shaking as she spoke directly to the judge. Gasps spread through the room like wildfire. Some folks exchanged confused glances. Others sat frozen in disbelief. She wasn't demanding a harsher penalty. She was begging for mercy, pleading with the court to reconsider the judge's harsh sentence, insisting that 25 years was far beyond what they had ever hoped for. If you've ever witnessed a moment when everyone mentally recalibrates at once, this was it. Reporters clicked their pens, lawyers blinked in confusion, and jurors sat straighter in their chairs. The victim's family outcry had turned the narrative on its head. Real-life lessons often hit you like this. When emotions boil over, people sometimes reveal truths even they didn't know they carried. And as her voice wavered but grew stronger, she said something that stuck with everyone. We wanted justice, not destruction. The room held its collective breath once again. All eyes turned to the defense attorney, who was already flipping through papers, clearly preparing for something that might just change everything. You know those moments in movies where time seems to slow down? This was one of them. The defense attorney, always sharp but rarely rattled, suddenly sprang into action like a chess master making a surprise move. Grabbing a stack of folders, flipping through with lightning speed, she filed a last-minute motion for reconsideration. Her voice, urgent but steady, filled the courtroom. "Your Honor, we have grounds for immediate review." The judge froze mid-sentence, his gavel hanging awkwardly in midair for a few painful seconds. The room stood still. The judge's hesitation wasn't subtle. You could see it in the way he tapped his pen against the desk, the way he avoided eye contact with both attorneys. Even people in the back rows leaned forward, sensing that this wasn't just procedural delay. This was real, human indecision playing out before their eyes. If you've ever had to make a life-altering decision on the spot, maybe quitting a job, calling off a wedding, or saying something that changes a relationship forever, you'd recognize that look on the judge's face. He thumbed through case notes, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The air felt heavier with each second of his silence. This last-minute motion wasn't just paperwork, it was a ticking time bomb. And just when it seemed like he might slam the gavel and shut it all down, he paused, long enough for people to exchange nervous glances. The courtroom was holding its breath again, waiting to see if this hesitation would crack open a door that, up until now, had seemed bolted shut. The defense attorney wasn't done, and neither was fate. And just when it seemed like the clock had run out, fate dealt another wild card. One of the defense interns, yes, the kind of kid who usually just organizes files, frantically waved a USB stick from the back of the room. "What's that?" The defense attorney rushed over, took one look, and her eyes widened. This was the forgotten evidence buried deep in discovery files, lost among months of paperwork. Until now, they scrambled to set up the video on the courtroom monitor. The judge raised an eyebrow, signaling for everyone to pause. The prosecutor folded his arms, clearly annoyed but curious. When the footage started rolling, the entire room leaned in. What they saw was nothing short of a shocking revelation. The grainy but clear security video showed another figure, someone who wasn't the student committing the crime. People gasped audibly. Hands shot to mouths, and even the court reporter stopped typing for a beat. The shocking revelation shattered everything the prosecution had built. Lawyers on both sides exchanged wide-eyed glances. and even the jurors, who had been visibly uncomfortable earlier, now sat frozen with stunned expressions. But despite this bombshell, time was running out. Legally, procedurally, and emotionally, the judge rubbed his temples, visibly stressed. The clock on the courtroom wall ticked louder with every passing second, or at least that's how it felt to everyone watching. The defense attorney, seizing the momentum, demanded immediate action. The prosecutor, still silent but shifting uncomfortably in his seat as the video looped again on screen. One thing was clear. The next few moments would decide everything. You know that collective inhale a crowd takes right before something huge happens. That's exactly what filled the room as the video played again. This time, people didn't hold back. Courtroom gasps erupted from every corner. Jurors, family members, even the bailiff stood frozen. The once stern atmosphere now buzzed with confusion and disbelief. Nobody had expected this. Some people whispered. Others covered their mouths and a few openly pointed at the screen, mumbling things like, "Is that who I think it is?" The forgotten evidence had cracked the case wide open, leaving everyone scrambling to process the shocking revelation they'd just witnessed. Reporters grabbed their phones, trying to send live updates. This wasn't just a twist. This was history in the making. But while the room surged with emotion, one person remained eerily still. The judge, eyes fixed on the monitor. He sat motionless, staring like he'd seen a ghost. The judge remained silent, lips pressed tight, fingers steepled under his chin. People waited and waited, wondering if he'd speak, call a recess, or at the very least acknowledge the chaos unraveling around him. The longer the silence stretched, the more the tension thickened. It was like watching a bomb with a visible countdown, and no one daring to cut the wire. The student's family held each other tighter. The defense attorney stood poised, ready for the next move. Everyone knew. The judge's next words could change everything, but nobody knew when, or if, they were coming. And then, finally, the judge moved. Slowly removing his glasses, he let out a long, shaky breath, the kind people take before making life-changing calls, clearing his throat. He delivered words no one in the room expected to hear. An unprecedented decision. The immediate suspension of the student's sentence. Gasps and scattered cheers followed like an electric shock wave through the courtroom. Given the new evidence and the motion filed, this court orders an immediate suspension of the sentence, pending further review, he declared, voice tight but clear. You could practically see people mouthing, "Did he just say that?" Reporters jumped up to dash outside for live coverage. Even the defense attorney blinked in disbelief before quickly gathering her files, ready for whatever would come next. The jurors, uncomfortable from earlier, now looked like they'd just been let off a moral hook they didn't even know they were hanging from. Some smiled nervously. Others just sat back, as if their lungs could finally fill again. The prosecutor, on the other hand, stood frozen, lips pursed in frustration. The legal battle continues, and you could bet he was already preparing his next strategic move, but here's the kicker. No one, not the defense, not the student, not even the victim's family, knew what came next. Would there be a new trial? Would charges be dropped? One thing was certain. This courtroom wasn't done serving up surprises. And the next one? Well, it was only minutes away. The moment the judge announced the temporary release, the room transformed. What had been a chamber of anxiety and heartbreak suddenly exploded into cheers. Family members rushed forward, hugging the student as if trying to make up for all the lost time in a single embrace. Tears flowed again, but this time, they were tears of relief. Laughter mixed with sobs in that messy, beautiful way only raw human joy can create. Friends who had stayed silent during the shocking conviction now cried openly, patting each other on the back, clapping, even shouting thanks toward the heavens. One elderly neighbor even stood on her chair, waving a small handkerchief like she was cheering at a football game. This wasn't just a win in the courtroom. It felt like a personal victory for everyone who believed in the student's innocence. But amid the celebration, reality set back in. The judge's warning rang in everyone's ears. This was just a temporary release. The legal battle continues with appeals, hearings, and more sleepless nights surely on the horizon. The defense attorney pulled the student aside, whispering about next steps, bail conditions, and what to expect in the coming weeks. The fight was far from over. And even as cameras flashed and reporters scrambled for interviews, there was an unspoken understanding in the room. This wasn't the final chapter. It felt like a breath of fresh air. Sure, but a storm was still brewing. What none of them knew was that the next twist would arrive sooner and louder than anyone could have predicted. And then, just as people started grabbing their coats ready to leave with renewed hope, the unthinkable happened. 2 uniformed officers entered the courtroom, walking with unmistakable purpose toward the back row. All eyes followed them. The air practically vibrated with tension. And there, sitting quietly with a nervous twitch in his leg, was the real culprit, someone who had been in the room the entire time. When the officers grabbed him, gasps shot through the room like a lightning bolt. Courtroom stunned didn't even begin to cover it. People jumped out of their seats, craning their necks to get a better view. Some started shouting. Others just stood there, mouths open, hands over their faces. The same prosecutor who'd delivered that cold speech earlier now stood frozen, watching his case crumble in real time as the man was cuffed and led away. The student, still wearing his courtroom clothes and looking like he hadn't slept in days, sat there staring. No tears, no outbursts, just the hollow look of someone realizing that while his physical chains were gone, the emotional ones might take years to break. His life had changed forever, a truth that weighed heavy in that room full of now silent spectators. The judge shuffled his papers, the defense attorney sat down hard in her chair, and the victim's family held each other tight, relieved but also visibly shaken. This wasn't closure. Not yet. Even as the real criminal disappeared behind courtroom doors, one undeniable fact lingered in everyone's mind. Some battles end with a bang, but healing, well, that's a whole different kind of fight. So, after all that, let me ask you something. What would you do if everything you worked for, your reputation, your freedom, your future, was stripped away in a single courtroom session? Would you crumble? Would you fight back? Or would you sit there in stunned silence like that student, not knowing if your next breath meant freedom or 25 years behind bars? This story wasn't just about a shocking conviction overturned, it was about how life can change in the blink of an eye, how forgotten evidence, a defense attorney's last-minute motion, or even one brave family's voice can rewrite history. And let's be real, how many people right now are sitting behind bars, waiting for their own twist of fate? Now it's your turn. Do you believe the justice system gets it right more often than not? Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment when the truth finally came out at the last second? What would you do if you were in that student's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get real about this, and hey, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next crazy, jaw-dropping story like this one. More courtroom drama, more life lessons, and more moments that remind us why truth matters.